Well, welcome everybody back to this remarkable place we like to call Weber Music Hall on another well above average temperature day here in northern Minnesota. And thank you for making time in your busy schedules to be here and be part of this important opportunity to welcome Dr. Cunningham to campus. I'm going to formally introduce Dr. Cunningham in a few minutes, but let me start with this warm welcome. And we mean warm from our hearts and warm from the fact that we're 10 degrees above the historic average temperature today, and you don't get to plow through any snow on your drive around the state. So all those are good, although we all lose sleep over what's happening with climate here. But it's my honor, Dave McMillan, to serve as interim chancellor here at UMD and to facilitate this forum, the last of 3 presidential forums. So I'll start with the formalities. This is being recorded. I think you all know that. And you have the opportunity to pick up any of the 3 candidates at any of the 5 sites, looking at the website, the search website. And the way we're going to proceed this morning is the same way we have last Tuesday and Thursday, with me laying out the groundwork, asking Dr. Cunningham a question, a pre-prepared question, and then we turn to you. And that's where you come in, and you're going to send questions to me via Carly and Jean on handwritten notes if you want. Those participating online can do so as well. We've had great online participation so far. And then we also have some questions submitted in advance if you're not sending questions my way. That hasn't been a problem yet, but we can always go to those. So we may not get to everybody's questions. We'll get to as many as we can, and we'll certainly do our best. And we've done pretty well, I think, at covering most of what's been asked, but I'll see if I can't stay with that track record. The Q&A feature, I think everybody knows how to use that on Zoom. And now I'm going to dip back into my past. I was a regent, and I know what input from faculty, staff, and students means. It means a lot. So give your input, and you can use that with the QR code up there. There's a shortened Z link, and then there's also the presidential search website. You have until Friday afternoon, I think, or Friday noon on the 23rd to get your feedback in. And then the board will spend next Monday sorting through everything and making some decisions, I think. But if they don't get feedback from you, they don't know what you think. So please do that. All right. Now it's my opportunity and pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Rebecca Cunningham, the Vice President for Research and Innovation at the University of Michigan. Vice President Cunningham earned her MD from Jefferson Medical College, as well as a bachelor's degree from Fairfield University. She completed her residency in emergency medicine at the University of Michigan Health System in Ann Arbor, and a postdoctoral research fellowship with the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. For more about her background, have a look at her CV and the full bio, all of which, again, is attached on the presidential website. Today, she's going to speak about the value of academic and research excellence. Dr. Cunningham, if you want to come up here and join me at the podium, I'll ask the question and then you can answer it. Vice President Cunningham, the university is a comprehensive and elite research institution with highly ranked departments across many disciplines, award-winning faculty and staff, and more than $1 billion in annual research and discovery expenditures across all of our campuses. The value of this academic and research excellence is manifest in the impact the university has on individuals and communities across our state. Please speak to the role that free inquiry and innovation has in the university's continued academic excellence, and how our tripartite mission of research, education, and outreach differentiates the University of Minnesota from other institutions. And welcome.
Good afternoon, Duluth. Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you. I am So excited to be here this afternoon, a few late morning, wherever we're at, noon here. A big thank you to the students and staff and faculty and community members who've taken your time to come out today. As your chancellor said, your voice and your input and your thoughts and your questions will make everything about this process better, and I will learn from them along the way as well. And so we're all very grateful. I want to really thank the regents and the trustees for allowing the opportunity for us to do this show and go campus to campus and really get to meet everybody. And I'll tell you why I think that's so important in a minute, as well as the regent staff, the board staff who has been driving me around, as well as the staff here who have worked to make the logistics possible. So I will certainly answer the themes and the prompts, not just theoretically, but partly by sharing with you some of my lived experience of this position that you might not read on my CV, and then what my actions have been specifically to live those values and to lead through those beliefs. The best way to understand where I will lead the University of Minnesota and help support Duluth is to understand who I've been and where I've been before, in the same way that I couldn't possibly know how great your campus is until I come and step feet here and walk. You will not, can't really know about me just from my CV. So the first thing I want to tell you is it's great to be back in Minnesota and to be back in Duluth. My Cunningham family has deep ties to the University of Minnesota. My late father-in-law was on faculty in the Twin Cities for 40 years. He was a gifted educator and passionate about the environment, leading the way in educational textbooks on environmental science at the forefront of the field, often with references to the stewardship of Minnesota land and specifically to the boundary waters often. He passed this passion of both a sustainable future and a love of Minnesota on to his family, and then to me, and then to our children, his grandchildren. For decades, we've shared and centered our three daughters' family time here in Minnesota, paddling the boundary waters most summers, cross-country skiing the lakes, many winters. I've often been in Duluth enjoying some of the best fresh smoked fish I've ever had in my life, while my kids tried to outdo each other to see who would actually go all the way in Lake Superior versus dipping their toes in. I have a lot to learn about the University of Minnesota Duluth and Wells, Minnesota, but I have a deep affection for the state and the region. Personally, I'm also very passionate about the mission of public education. It's what lifted my family up out of economic hardship. I was the first in my family to go to a residential college on Pell Grants. These experiences inform my guiding principle that talent is everywhere, and an essential role of public higher education is to provide access and opportunity for all students, regardless of background or economic privilege, to be able to lift them up to fulfill their full potential. I also understand firsthand the academic and social challenges that many first-generation students can navigate as they first come to college. In my current role as the Vice President for Research and Innovation at a Big Ten Midwest public research university with oversight of our $1.8 billion research expenditures, a focus across our campuses is well baked in on Great Lakes sustainability, on sustainability in general. And the honor that you have here to be right on the Great Lakes is certainly something that I'll talk more about. My portfolio includes research across our three system campus, including our Dearborn campus, which has a lot of parallels to the Duluth campus. They're not quite as lucky to be on the edge of the Great Lakes. We'll talk more about that, but I work with their chancellor frequently in thinking about how we can work and integrate their research mission with their educational mission. From that experience, I can really see easily, it's obvious, and even just the first conversations here on what a gem U of M Duluth is, and the user manual over here, my friend, the user manual to the Great Lakes for the public, and bringing that science forward and Sea Grant knowledge on to the public is just one of many things. Again, it's amazing to talk about a land grant university with service to the state, a service and a mission that I deeply believe in, and a focus on stewardship of the environment. A Sea Grant is really just a whole nother even opportunity, especially in this time of climate change. The understanding and stewardship of our Great Lakes and the environment will be even more important in coming years, and educating a workforce, one that's differentiated by strong research here, will be critical to Duluth, and Duluth is well poised to deliver. At a time of great climate migration, and I have adopted at home immediately asking why we do not have a version of the amazing slogan, Climate Proof Duluth. There are tremendous opportunities for strong research-focused campus on the edge of a fifth of the world's fresh water, with a lot of focus on sustainability to shine, plus many, many, many other assets of a comprehensive university. As the VPR of innovation, not surprisingly, I'm passionate about research, and it's as one integrated facet into our tripartite mission. And I almost, for many, want to call it knowledge generation. For many, research almost sounds too wonky. What is that exactly? Research is really creation of knowledge. I want to call out that improving and amplifying our research is linked to and not opposed to our educational mission. It makes the other better. They each make each other stronger and differentiate the campus to be all it can be. When our research is strong and our faculty are passionate about it, it strengthens our educational mission. It draws students and gives them the opportunities for engaged learning that they simply can't get at many of your competitors. Research of the magnitude at the University of Minnesota Duluth is a differentiator across the state and the region. For undergraduates, when this knowledge generation is paired to excite and provide hands-on engaged learning that directly affects the problems of the local communities here as well across the region that you serve, which is a unique region here in the Great Lakes. It also informs the nation's research, and I've heard some about how it informs the world's research on fresh water. Then the graduate programs and the ability to focus on this, like few other universities in the region, that is a differentiator. And the co-location of both an amazing set of health programs here and pharmacy and medical training. I can't forget also that medical part of my life is much needed in rural and local health, and also has amazing opportunities also for the integration of that work across the science portfolio, which is something that I work on frequently in my home institution with amazing health sciences research and amazing engineering and technical research. Those things go together and create amazing solutions for patients and for the world. So for some examples of putting this focus of research into practice at the University of Michigan over the past year, I launched a system-wide program to amplify our research to supports for our researchers, open to all the system campuses, almost all of our funding, actually all of the funding that comes out of my office is open to all system campuses. But specifically, one of the things we did was a support in obtaining foundation research, that high-risk research that's often not funded federally, or maybe because it's more locally relevant and how we can help faculty be really competitive for that, as well as increased programming support for the really large grants, the grants that take team science, that sometimes involve collaborators from a campus like this and other campuses together, maybe even campuses not within the university system, and how you put together those really big ideas. And we've put together supports for teams for that. My office recently supported contributions to the NSF Engines grant focused on the Great Lakes. And we've done this in ways that faculty, again, across the system can come together in teams. In terms of outreach for the tripartite mission as it relates to research, I've always had a really strong focus on research to practice, knowledge to action. There's a need for foundational research always, but we have to work to make sure that discovery doesn't sit on a shelf, it doesn't gather dust, but it moves to applications in our communities, those broader impacts lingo in NSF lingo or dissemination efforts in a broader health portfolio are not add-ons to the research, but they're essential and integral to why we do them and what the impact is for them of the world, and by proxy, then what the impact is of the university to our communities around them. In my portfolio, we don't have the wonderful extension offices that you have here, but this mission was so important to me that I grew an office of public engagement and research impacts, focused on supporting our scholars to translate their research for meaningful societal benefit that has the opportunities, tools, and resources and skills to do so equitably and effectively. I know you have fabulous leadership here and great leadership in thinking about research throughout clearly, and directors of amazing institutes. And I really look forward to your questions. Thank you so much for the privilege of having me here today and hosting, and I'll stop here and take questions.
All right, well, we'll sit down in these champ chairs. That's
Yeah,
our
these are
mascot
great.
champ. So
Yeah,
he's ever present on campus here. So one of the one of your predecessors, as we were approaching these chairs, thought maybe it felt a little like a Dick Cavett show. So then he proceeded to tell me he didn't think I probably knew who that was, but I assured him I was old enough to know exactly who that was. But we won't be too Cavett-esque here, just a fun and informative conversation. So I've got a bunch of questions, and I'm going to jump right in. A couple here that relate to relationships with tribal nations.
Mhm.
And what would your priorities be in working with tribal nations? And then a second part that relates to that, if you're familiar with the Truth, TRUTH project report, what are your thoughts about that?
So you're also in, I talked about some of the things that differentiate this university that are obvious to an outsider. I mean, certainly the commitment and the historical commitment to tribal nations is really key, and to the education that we must do going forward. And that commitment is a clear priority, and one that I'm really welcome to see. My experience with our tribal nations is at the University of Michigan. I oversee our Native American Graves Repatriation Act office. I recently expanded that office by 2 or 3 staff. I was the first to hire in staff that were specifically from the tribal communities. We have a lot of work to do there. That office is responsible for the repatriation of ancestors and funerary objects that were taken the wrong way at the wrong time from communities, and returning them in a respectful way. That's given me the opportunity to be on point for the university in many ways in regards to our tribal relations. To further that relationship, one of the things that we're doing, that my office initiated, is in the next 2 months, about 2 months from now, we'll be hosting 50 of the tribal elders from across the Midwest. And so we may have some folks from here as well in for a dinner to honor the elders, to get to make sure that we have clear and open dialogue and show the respect for the office that we have. That office at the University of Michigan has been seen and noted by our tribal communities to be a leader nationally in how we're doing that work. There's a lot of universities that are just figuring out that work. And we've been deeply engaged for a long time. And I'm humbled by how wonderful our office has been at making those connections and doing it respectfully, and returning things so promptly, and with so much speed and connections and respect with our tribal communities. The Truth Project, I have begun to read. I have not delved into all of it. I can see that there's some recommendations. I would love to have further conversation with you, maybe some of you at the forum, a little bit on what people's hopes are for that moving forward. It looks like the beginning of a really good conversation. There's obviously more work to do in how we in our education. And I know there's recently been some state conversations and university conversations in what the commitment has been to education for students. And that needs to be an ongoing commitment, with the recognition of the tribal sovereignty and what we can do to move forward together and better, and with those voices that are so important across our community.
Good. Well, that's your answer in raising the NAGPRA, the repatriation work, is I'm sitting on an email from Karen Diver, the senior advisor to the president, waiting for me to appoint somebody from this campus to do exactly that. So good, important, really critically important partners. In fact, Friday I'm off to the American Indian Advisory Board meeting on the Fond du Lac Reservation. So I find that to be a remarkably energizing and important part of what we do here. Second set of questions here. UMD has a unionized faculty. How do you anticipate interacting with the collective bargaining process? And then joined with that, I think in the same vein, is you're talking about your experience working with unionized employees, unionized faculty in particular, and any thoughts and experiences you want to share with us in that space.
Yeah, so our unions and our bargains, for and with employees are a critical component, a major stakeholder for us. My first experience with unions is the house officer, the residency folks at the hospital that I trained were unionized, and I indeed was part of the house staff union at that time. It gave a tremendous opportunity for me coming into that role as a as a resident to already have a playbook and rules of the road and know that we'd be treated fairly with negotiations that had happened ahead of time. And I think that truly is the role that can happen with faculty as well. The opportunity, unions provide us the opportunity to lay the cards on the table fully to surface and make visible, at regular periods, what's working well and what's not working well. And then the ability to negotiate in a way that at the end of that negotiation, we don't have the inequities that can happen across the departments by ad hoc decisions here and there. Instead, we have a uniform playbook. It doesn't mean it's always easy to get there. We have an assortment of unions at the University of Michigan. We have a graduate student teaching assistant union. I know your grad students here have just unionized. Our graduate student research assistants are just in the process of getting themselves organized. So those are all opportunities. Certainly they can be bumpy along the way, but I think it's an important conversation to have. And when done well, it provides a really great playbook. I think the other thing that we realized, some years back when our lecturers union, the adjunct faculty, the lecturers union was unionized, when they came forth, when it became clear how uneven and what the compensation issues really were, that was an opportunity to raise it up to a level that otherwise only was coming through individual HR folks or individual departments. And so it does make visible the things that really need to be discussed, to lay them on the table and to work forward with them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I add one more thing to that?
You sure can. Please, Dr. Cunningham.
The other thing I see is the opportunity when there are unions and bargain for contracts on campus. There's other groups that we have on campus of administrators, or I could pick other groups that are being treated very unevenly across their units. We're very decentralized. You folks are very decentralized in our RCM model. And, it also helps, I think, the administration think that, we have to be proactive here in addressing these groups. And it gives us the opportunity to try to do that also and help with the equity across the groups, because there's certainly in an RCM model with a decentralized focus, there are differences in units and differences in places. And sometimes those are fine and healthy, and sometimes they reach a point where they're not so healthy. And having the experience of the other bargain for employees can help us think about that.
Let's go from that to a couple of questions that focus on the role of a system leader and the role of campus leaders, and there's a longstanding concern that can the system leader, who also serves as the head of the Twin Cities campus, is there any structural issues there or concerns, or how has Michigan managed that? And what would your views be around making sure a system leader takes all campuses into consideration?
We have the same structure essentially. So the head, the president of the system at the university is the president of the Ann Arbor campus, and then the chancellors are separate. I think the right leader at the right time recognizes the opportunity for what the system is, and that this job is the system. And in the same way that, and that is one family, each of that family having specific leadership roles with deference to some of the local knowledge, much of the local knowledge and local needs, and how I've gotten a great tour between Morris and Crookston and now here Duluth. Each of the campuses in the system have unique missions that are really clearly differentiated, and together they are bigger than the sum of the parts. A system president's job is to help see what the sum of those parts are, make them visible, make it clear where the system is running as a whole for a vision, but then also how the visions of the individual campuses rise up and are celebrated in that. Of course, there is a lot more activity on in the Twin Cities and a lot more activity just by volume in Ann Arbor. But with the right leadership structures in place at those places and with the right organizational structures in place, certainly you can have the information flowing and really be, a president of the system and be looking out and working with the chancellors who have their vision at each place. And that's certainly why I'm interested in this position is not because it is a single campus or what some people call a flagship campus. Clearly, the beauty you have here in the Minnesota system is you have the opportunity really to be Minnesota education for all, with all the ways it can be differentiated in these unique missions, and the opportunity to articulate that and help with the vision and strategy for that as a system and how you can serve in a unique way for the state of Minnesota is what the golden opportunity really is here to articulate.
Good. It's been a fascinating journey for me from 2011 to 2022 with a governance view of systems.
Right.
And now jumping into a leadership role here at the second largest campus. And, my own views evolve in that space. So,
the converse is problematic also. I mean, there's no perfect organizational chart. It also has to depend on the relationships and the commitments that we make when we are engaged in positions. But if you have a system president who isn't also on the ground at a campus, then they also lose the ability to actually know what it's like. I mean, you've learned what it's like to actually run the place, right? And that's different, right? That's different. And the ability for a system president to also have to deal with those issues, which are similar in many ways across campuses on their own place, makes, a little bit more walk in the shoes feel for when we're talking to other chancellors as well.
Yeah, and then there's resource issues associated with system offices that they cost money. And I've always been intrigued by the similarities in ways with a very large campus in Ann Arbor and then Dearborn and Flint. And we have one very large campus and a small one in Rochester, and then three up kind of covering the rest of the state. So we're not that large a system geographically or by, total campuses, but a lot like Michigan. So sticking with the theme of how coordinated and really thoughtful system level leadership can impact things. What about enrollment management across multiple campuses? And we've all seen and witnessed, flagships that were unable to recruit internationally, like places like the Twin Cities and Ann Arbor do as COVID came and went, and now demographic challenges. And I think many would love to return to a day when regionals were regionals and flagships were flagships, but there's intersections in those spaces. And what views do you have about how a system can bring strength to helping regionals navigate choppy waters?
And the waters are choppy, and they're choppy across the country, and certainly with our system campuses as well. The decline in the demographic shift down is something that everybody is feeling. I'll get into individual strategies and thinking about it from a system level, but at the highest level, what's needed at the system president level is to help each of the campuses think about collectively and articulate what's the optimal size for them to be in 2024. And, to steal a phrase of a wise woman is, that may not be the peak size that I was. The clothes that I wore in high school might not be the size of clothes that I fit right now. What is the right size for us for 2024 at each of the campuses? How does enrollment management help fill the goals that we have? And what is the strategy around the campus? So it's sometimes easy to say that, so many students more in the tuition that would fix things. And although certainly there can be room for capacity and enrollment management growth, but there's also, it's important to do it within the full view of what is the optimal size for us and why. Why is that? Not because we used to be that size, but because it's the right size for us in 2024 and for us in 2030 and for us in 2035. So with that high level thinking that gets done then across each of the campus, there is an opportunity both for strategy And I'm sure you have good enrollment management professionals here who are very engaged. And I know the enrollment management professionals are already talking across campus and sharing best practices. But what are the ways that some of those thinking can really be extended for even more best practices? So, for example, what programs are in place to streamline admission for folks that weren't coming directly from college at 18, but now this is the right place for them to have education going forward. What opportunities are there for connections in 2+2 or 2+1 opportunities, either with the Twin Cities or also from the community colleges coming the other way? Oh, that got loud. Certainly there's the need for really understanding, you have a differentiator here competitively in being this solid research comprehensive. And so who understanding collectively, and the job of a president would be to work with the chancellor as we understand who are your competitors, how are we making it completely clear what your competitive advantage is, and then can everybody sing that really clearly as a mission, and can we articulate it really clearly, and then can we get that message down to our alumni to help us carry the water, because they're great for carrying those messages to the right high schools on the ground, boots work to really make that clear going forward. Good work by communications folks to be articulated clear message that everyone can move forward on. And those are the aggressive recruiting tactics that happen. And then when we have clarity on exactly what our right size is and who the population of students is best likely for us to be competing for, are two things. And then the third thing, and I know there's a new version of this at Minnesota, but at the University of Michigan, we have the Go Blue guarantee. And it's catchy, right? And it's so catchy that every high school student, we try to make sure knows that if they fit in an income bracket that's under a certain amount, that they don't have to worry about that scary sticker price anywhere about that they go for free. And we make that really, really clear. And I know the state is putting forth some things. And, my question as a system would be, are there top-offs to that? Are there ways that we should be aiding in that in particular niches or particular places to accelerate management? These are the questions to be asked. And then at the system level, are there opportunities for any efficiencies? Are there things that can be done? We have now, when students apply to the Ann Arbor campus, they can immediately, check and have their applications considered at other places. There's pluses and minuses in that, and they're actually the way it's done operationally matters. But how much of that is working? What opportunities are there for that kind of system thinking? And then what opportunities are there for support for the marketing and communications components and best practices, so that Dearborn is singing a clear song, Duluth. I do think about Dearborn a lot. Duluth is thinking about, what's right for Duluth. But when somebody enters your mix, you can also say, oh, and this is why Rochester is also really great, so that you really can be working in unison as a family of schools, all in the family. And the reason that gets so important is as the market gets tighter, we need to make sure that we're not competing with each other, that we're differentiated, not competing, because there's plenty of external threats outside of the university to thinking about our competition. So how do we get our song right in our own house across the system and sing it together? Yeah.
Great answer. And I have to resist the urge right now to hijack the whole conversation and dig deeper and deeper into several of the things you just said, because clearly this system has a lot of opportunity to do across a number of things you just said, whether it's programmatic on the admission side, on how are we handling the crossover admits. It's just there's a lot of opportunity there, and you touched on a number of places. I want to ask you though, does Michigan actually have an officer that's responsible for enrollment at the top, or is it divvied up between a provost and a president?
No, there's not a systems office and enrollment management strategy. There's a lot of work between them, but there's not. That's not to say that there's not opportunity for that, and that there isn't. That's not a forward way to be thinking about it. Yeah, and Michigan has many of its own struggles there, along with their the system campuses of Dearborn and Flint are having exactly the same hard conversations that you folks are having here.
Unless anyone in the audience or my boss or others watching think that I'm not putting down a marker that that's the right outcome, but I think we've realized that that it's a challenge without one person that is thinking about, you know, here at 69,000 when you total up all 5 campuses, and how we solve for that is the challenge and the opportunity. So I want to keep going on a couple of these themes. How have you supported the humanities in your research and teaching at Michigan? What would be your vision for supporting the arts and humanities here at Minnesota?
Yeah, I didn't even plant that question. I love it so much. So I made a real shift when I came into my office, that, you know, the office would not be serving one particular school really mostly, but I was the first physician that had come into my office actually in about 40 years. And so I took a really wide view of supporting research across the campus, research, scholarship, and creative practice. And we made that shift in language almost immediately. And from there, we worked to develop the programming in place, certainly programming that helps faculty that are doing sponsored projects, like I mentioned, or foundation work, like we mentioned, but I also developed a block grant program to the School of the our LS&A, our Arts and Science and Humanities School, and also to the Art School and the Music School and the School of Architecture. And so those block grants provide funding specifically to the schools that's modest, but allows their research leadership within their schools then apply that in the best way. So we've done some funding that's central like that. But probably the more interesting work, and that's gone a long way, a small amount of funds with our humanities and with our arts have created tremendous scholarship. We've also, that foundation office that I set up, you know, helped our art school get its first NEA grant, which was a partnership between them and the School of Public Health to do work on murals and violence in Detroit in an amazing way. So that's the kind of cross work that we've also done in addition to funding individually. Most recently, we've really taken, there's a larger arts initiative at the University of Michigan, and my office took on specifically, what did that mean for arts research? And so I created a new position of arts integrated research, a new director position. And that position is responsible for funding a grants program that is specific to arts integration. Again, often it can be in one discipline, but really looking at how the arts is integrated across. I'm already funding the schools individually for how they're support their faculty in their research, but then also thinking about, again, from a systems point, which is where I also would work as president, is also how we can integrate between these areas, and where there's strength in one school, and that's important to support the individual school or the individual campus. We also can do really cool and interesting things when we think about how we do that cross-disciplinary, transdisciplinary work, and bringing that forward for really interesting ideas. And a lot of times I think really sort of the secret sauce to where the most cutting edge ideas are at the boundaries of those disciplines, and the ways that we can foster that and coming forward can be really exciting. But certainly I have not been a VPR that has just been focused on STEM or just on medicine or just on engineering. There's also a humanities collaboratory at the university that's funded separately and specifically focused on the humanities.
Nice. I had another question about diversifying the research portfolio system-wide, but I think you covered that. But obviously, there's an interest here in being more than STEM and more than health, more than just about anything. I would like you. So, if you've got anything else you want to say about diversifying, the system-wide portfolio.
Yes. So. You know, I've spent a fair amount of time thinking and looking. We actually have a new program we've launched called Amplified Research, which I mentioned a little bit about. But in that, in addition to, we need to diversify our research portfolio. You know, anybody who knows our major funding agencies or has gotten, you know, an NIH grant, the NIH Capline grant is the same amount now as it was when I was a postdoc. It's the same amount of money. It's, you know, so we have to think about how we diversify our portfolio broadly. But how we diversify it from the types of work that gets done. So, the federal agencies are really important, but how are we doing in our foundation work? How are we doing in our industry partnerships? The University of Minnesota has a fairly impressive industry partnerships, public-private partnerships that do a lot of funding, and that's really important. And then how are we doing in gift work and gift work towards research, which is something that's also really important. So that diversified portfolio is important, not just because it's a different way to get money, but because those aspects fund different kinds of research. And if your portfolio isn't fleshed out across them, then you can't do all the kinds of work. And so I've worked a fair amount with some of our schools where on our cost recovery model, some schools were finding it difficult to take foundation money because they would have to pay the expenditures on that. And that was they were having to actually tell faculty at times, no, you can't take that foundation grant because it's going to be too expensive for us. That made their VPR lose sleep. So we've worked and are continuing to work on how we might mitigate that structural budgetary issue so that we can make sure that we have foundation research funded, because foundation research, also is the research sometimes that's about the community down the road or about the really high risk, high reward work in the health or other places that won't get done otherwise.
Good. Well, thanks for deepening that answer a bit. And you mentioned foundations and use philanthropy in there, but you talked about gift work. Give us a sense of how you've supported and how you've grown philanthropic activity and tied it into research or broader system priorities. It's been fascinating to me and very, very inspirational to be in an administrative role now, as opposed to a governance role where I always supported philanthropy, but more in a ceremonial sense. And now seeing the power and value and inspirational character that donors bring to the table. Talk for this audience about your sense of where philanthropy fits in the modern university big systems.
Philanthropy is, our alumni are amazing in many different ways, and obviously philanthropy comes both from alumni and not alumni. But I'll say separately, which is not part of the question, but the engagement with our alumni is critical, regardless of their involvement in our philanthropy. They have the longest history, the most caring about the university. They span multiple administrations, and they'll tell you and give you great insight from their work out in the business world, the corporate world, or the community lens that they have, and bring that forward. And so, first of all, the work with our alumni is really important. Specific to philanthropy and to raising money, so I have experience. I engage a lot with our donors at multiple levels. So I'm certainly engaged with our major gift donors. In some cases, simply to understand what their views are, plus or minus when they're specifically funding something that's in particularly my portfolio. But because they have a view of the university that's really important for us to understand and to continue to be partners with them on, and I really do view them as partners. So I certainly have experience with major gifts. I've raised funds for global initiatives, funds for an institute, in the order of $20 million, $5 million, et cetera, to raise money and funds to move initiatives forward, partnering with our alumni to help set out what their sometimes co-joined vision of that is. But separate than that work, which I think is, good, but also fairly standard and expected across our portfolio by our deans and by our senior leadership, I've been working with our VP of development to think about how we're fundraising for some of these things, especially in a research portfolio. So research I haven't talked to your development folks here to know, but we're in a very decentralized model, and gift officers are in schools, and research deans have their own priorities, which is really important. However, some of the biggest issues of our time cross those portfolios, and we have to make sure that the incentive structure isn't set up for the gift officers so that they're actually competing internally, back to that, like, let's not compete in the family, let's have a unified face. So in order to do that, and I think this was almost the question with the system president, you have to do some restructuring of the roles and restructuring of the foundational back end work on the development and how you incentivize those positions to be getting credit when we share, when we raise things together. We also are able to move forward and help work with our external partners. So that's been a big role on some of our bigger, and we've just hired 3 new positions that have a role specifically for that cross-institutional institutes that might even cross campuses, but certainly is not focused in a particular dean's portfolio or a particular provost portfolio, let's say. That's one way. Some of the other ways I've been involved with fundraising and philanthropy has been to think about with our VP of development, who's been a really great partner, is to think about a different generation of fundraising. There are many folks that would like to be engaged and to give that are not in a demographic and in a generation or in a younger generation. We can really think broadly about our donors and about philanthropy, and how can we do that requires different tactics. We have to have different digital reach out tactics, different social media tactics, and how we engage with them specifically, and how we bring in people right out of school and earlier generation is really important to make sure that they stay engaged. And then a final way I've been involved with philanthropy. I'm sorry, this is beeping. Is to really think about who we're talking to and who I'm talking to. I had many conversations early on with some of the development folks that I was working with most closely to say, are there other demographics and genders I could talk to potentially? I would love to talk to them. They also control a fair amount of money and have really important good ideas. And so how can we make sure that we're really talking to a full range of donors and not limiting to a particular Rolodex that somebody had before, when both the world has moved on and also other people may want to talk to me and provide me with insights and opportunities.
Good. Well, you keep touching on topics that we just, in the world of growing our base and looking at different generations of potential future gifters and students and engagers. I see one of our gift officers right here in the audience. We brought young parents and young children into contact with our art educators and our outdoor educators around Dragons Love Tacos, the current show at just across the
Dragon doesn't.
Yeah, and it was fascinating to me. I don't know that we'll raise a ton of money from that event itself, but growing that that connection with a whole different generation of people. So anyway, sorry to go off on something, but I told you that inspires me. That was one of those inspirational moments Sunday. Duluth has many sustainability efforts and a strong interest in that. How would you plan to further sustainability work across this big system? And would that be a priority for you?
It certainly would be a priority for me, and should be a priority for anybody in this role and for anybody in leadership roles across the campuses. We have a climate emergency, and we all need to be doing our own part, both on campus and then in many different ways. So this is a little bit of the way that I approach it. You certainly have a climate action plan here. And I've seen, the project progress and the metrics towards that, and those are great. At the university, I've been involved. We also have a plan for climate action, and initially when that plan started, it was developed in a very academic way, which is important. Although, in order for it to really move off the shelf and into practice, we really had to bring in the full partnership across some of the executive silos, so to speak. And we needed the operational folks to be fully engaged as the buildings that are going to be built and the parking lots that are going to be built and where's the solar going to go. That has to be deeply involved. So it can't be an academic only run component. There has to be a deep work and thinking by the facilities folks with a lot of creativity, by the facilities folks, from the head of facilities all the way down, to be able to really enact that for what the campus plan is specifically. Certainly in terms of the research portfolio around sustainability, I oversee several of our sustainability institutes at the university. There's opportunity there for, again, the new knowledge generation. You're tremendously positioned both in messaging and marketing here, as well as in the reality of where you sit, to be focused on that message and to use that then to really be generating the knowledge on sustainability that we'll need to be pushing out. But at the same time, I hope, and the opportunity that we're really leaning into on campus, is how we then work on that as a living learning lab for our students at the same time. So when you're creating the X project to fix the Y building here, you know, are we studying that at the same time so that other people will know in this climate how that works and how it doesn't work, so that that can inform the knowledge in other places in the country and the world. And that's a great opportunity. How will it affect the lakes here, et cetera. And then, of course, on the educational component, we have a deep need and commitment towards education on sustainability across learners, and to make that integral. And so I've been involved in touching parts of that portfolio at the university, but it will take multiple executive officers and certainly system leadership to really reinforce. And the decisions get difficult, obviously, as funds and budget are difficult, but we're going to have to continue to make progress on that. And we can do it in a way that will help create, with a longer view of the budget, will help create both savings and then position us correctly.
Good. Let's change. I got another online question here. Change the definition of climate and go to culture and climate and campus climate. Any thoughts on building positive climates in the world of academia today?
It's a broad question,
yes,
but obviously
yep.
Climate and culture are incredibly important. You know, I think sometimes this question, and I'll maybe just hit it head on, and maybe this isn't where you were going with it or not, but this often is around the climate that we live in currently, and the world that we live in, and the global context that we live in right now. And you know, certainly the need for consistent and clear work on academic freedom, and the importance of academic freedom for how we think collectively about free speech, especially when free speech that's happening, the protected speech that's happening, isn't speech that we like. Knowing that can feel hurtful and harmful, making sure that doesn't cross over, and being coupled with good policies so it doesn't cross over into threats, harassment, violence. I have a long history, if you look at my scholarship, of working on safety, actually in a national way, on school safety, on campus safety, on safety in our communities, and on helping communities that have been deeply hurt come together towards a common mission and a common goal. Those are difficult conversations. And no, we're not going to get to this particularly easily, but we have to work on being able to sit down and discuss civilly with each other what the issues actually are, with the willingness to understand what a common goal is that we can agree on, and how we can work to that. And sometimes groups are so far apart that that we can agree on absolutely nothing, except, you know, potentially that we still care about each other as human beings, and we would like the campus or the community or the classroom that we're in to be safe. And so sometimes we have to start with that base part and then move forward.
Yeah, I think you framed that up nicely in terms of how does an academic world see itself in the world, the greater world around us. And there's times when you watch political discourse that you're not sure they even care about each other as humans. So
right.
the fundamental starting point you just closed with is perhaps a recipe for future success in the broader society around us, but I'm being naive. Last question here, an online question again, and I'll just read it so that you can frame it, your answer. Do you have a perspective on how UMD faculty can balance teaching and research opportunities when our peers in the regional space do not have the research strength that we have? and that we'd like to maintain.
So an easy one for the last one, really, is what you're saying. So
Yes.
this is obviously a really difficult topic. It's a topic that all campuses that are trying to really truly balance a tripartite mission have to manage. I've managed and thought about this question a lot in terms of both. I managed a department portfolio and was responsible for 100 faculty, their academic and their research scholarship across 3 different health system campuses. So specifically in that space, trying to manage their clinical load in addition to their educational commitments to the medical school, and then also to their research and scholarship. Certainly on campus and in both Dearborn and Flint, this is a topic that comes up really frequently. I will promise you no easy answer, but I will promise you that I understand the issue deeply, that there are some ways to think about it that can move us forward. We do need to have, I think here, it would be tragic to not have that full three mission with research really, kept strong. How we do that and how we balance portfolios and how we do that across a department versus across individuals is a much longer conversation. But what I can tell you is that I thought a lot about it, both at the local level as well as at the level with our chancellors of the other campuses as they're looking at the teaching loads. And sometimes, when I work with my health system colleagues with their clinical loads and how we're going to then keep our also very important mission focused together. And, I guess what I can say to you is I'm always an advocate for research. We have a mission to do also education and service, which I'm also an advocate for. And so we have to find a path forward. And there are ways to think about it. And I would certainly want to work with your chancellor and understand where the campus is at exactly and what the local issues are and what levers can be pulled to make that work for you so that you can succeed.
Well, thank you. We are approaching the very last couple minutes here as I watch people getting ready to get going. It reminds me that the noon hour calls, and I'm going to wind us down here. First of all, remind everybody that we do have an open house upstairs and down the hall out in front of Romano Gym. And you're welcome to come down there. You can get some one-on-one time with Dr. Cunningham and probably some snacks and goodies as well. And on behalf of the entire Duluth campus, thank you for being here today. And a special call out to Brian and Marlo from the Office of the Board of Regents. I have firsthand knowledge of what their life is like right now, and it is quite busy. And then Jean and Carly in my office, without whom none of these events would even happen. So thanks to those 4 individuals. Thanks to all of you for being here, and thanks especially to you for finding your way here.
Yeah, thanks so much for hosting. Please come over and talk.